Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome to the November 4, 2022 California Board of Behavioral Sciences meeting. My name is Max Disposti. I'm the board chair, pronounced him as. And before we convene, I would like to remind everyone that's present that the board is a consumer protection agency that is charged with administering and enforcing the board laws. Where protections of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public should be paramount. The Board of Behavioral Sciences will be holding this public meeting in person and via WebEx platform. So thank you, moderator, for being there supporting us. I will announce when we are accepting public comments on the various issues. For each public comments period, we will first be accepting the comments of the people, the participants in the audience, here in Sacramento, and then the moderator will open the lines as appropriate so that the remote audience members can also comment. Each commentator will have 2 minutes to comment. Moderator, good morning to you again. Would you please provide the audience instructions on how they might participate during the meeting and appropriate times?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. If you wish to participate in public comments, in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you will find a Q&A box. You will type comment into the box and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users will dial *3 to raise their hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And with that, back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. And we're now moving to the roll call. And fellow board members, when you're introducing yourself, please share if you're a public member or a licensee. And Christina Kitamura, can you help us? Thank you.
Good morning. Eleanor Uribe, licensed clinical social worker here. Abigail Ortega. LCSW member present. Susan Friedman.
Public member present.
Wendy Strack.
Public member present.
Justin Hust.
LMFT member present.
Max Disposti.
Public member, board chair present.
Christopher Jones.
LEP member, vice chair present.
Joan Sovek.
LMFT member present. My pronouns are he, him.
Kelly Ranasinghe.
Public member present.
Dr. Annette Walker.
Good morning. Present. Public member, pronouns she, her, and hers.
And for the record, Ross Ehrlich and Yvette Caceres-Willis are absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Christina. And now we're moving to agenda item 12. Just a little announcement before we move on with the agenda item today. We decided, for the sake of having, we have people on the audience and people on the web that are eager to discuss with us a couple of agenda items. So to avoid making them wait too long, we're trying to anticipate a couple of agenda items. So the the presentation by the board staff and the executive officer report, excuse me, item 19 and 20 will be postponed after item 21. So that perhaps that will save some time for people that just join us for those specific items. And say that, I would like to move to the introductions. Board staff, if you can please introduce yourself, and thank you again from my left.
Good morning, Marlon McManus, Assistant Executive Officer.
Roseanne Helms, Legislative Manager for the board.
Christina Kitamura, Administrative Analyst for the board.
Sabina Knight, Legal Counsel for the board.
And Steve Sodergren, Executive Officer for the board.
And I believe all the staff introduced is here. And now I would like to invite, for the members of the public that are here present, if you would like to announce yourself and the organization you represent, if any. Thank you.
Morning, Ben Caldwell, MSP.
Can we adjust mic? Yeah, thank you.
Just in time, Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California chapter.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public that would like to introduce themselves? Okay, moderator, would you like to, could you please open the lines to see if there are any other public members that would like to introduce themselves via WebEx?
We are now accepting people via WebEx to introduce themselves. I saw a hand just a moment ago, and we're going to send a request to unmute your microphone, Jeffrey. Hold on just a moment, please. All right, Jeffrey, we see that you're unmuted. Oh. Let's move on to Leah Brew. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
She, her, hers, LPCC member and counselor educator.
Thank you. And let's circle back. We have another hand up. Kimberly Miller, hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. All right, Kimberly Miller, we're going to send you a second request to unmute your microphone. All right. We have a note from Kimberly that she says that she's not receiving audio. Kimberly, we'll work with you to get that resolved. I don't know how you can hear me.
Thank you, moderator.
You have audio.
In case members of the audience can always write down in the their name and the associations, if any, that they belong to. So that will be enough at the moment. Okay. Anyone else?
That appears to be all, sir.
There are or they're not? They're not? Okay. So, moderator, are we good?
Kimberly Miller has stated that she cannot unmute, but we are communicating with her via text. We'll continue to work with her. That's all.
Okay, that's wonderful. Hopefully there was a problem with connection, so hopefully we're good with that. We're moving now to our consent calendar on our agenda for today, which is agenda item 13. Is the possible approval for the May 5th and 6th and August 11 and 12, 2022 board meeting minutes. Does any members wish to remove or correct or adjust anything from the consent calendar that you might have noticed? Okay, then do we have a motion to approve?
I have a correction
Please,
on
Kristen.
my own minutes. On the August minutes, page 2, line 39, that PM should be AM on the last sentence, line 39, and that was off.
Thank you. I believe those are minor corrections and that don't affect the meaning of the agenda, so I appreciate you, so we can definitely integrate those. Anything else? Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second?
It'd be great to have the dates of each meeting in there because we have two sets of minutes.
Okay, so we have two votes or
You
just
can
one?
include them both. I just need the dates in the motion.
Right, okay. I make a motion to approve the May 5th and 6th and the August 11, 12, 2022 board meetings minutes. Thank you, Council. I made a motion. I believe Dr. Walker seconded the motion.
Yes, sir.
And Christine, if we can hold the vote. Thank you.
Public comment.
Oh, sorry. Any public comment first? Coffee hasn't kicked in yet. Any public comments from the audience? I don't see any. Moderator, can you please open the lines and see if there are any public comments for the consent calendar motions on the floor? Thank you.
We are now accepting public comment for consent calendar. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment on the consent calendar, shall we return to the agenda?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. And now we still have a vote pending, if we can call the roll. Thank you.
Eleanor Uribe?
Voting for the consent calendar. Yes.
For both?
Yes. It's just a vote.
Abigail Ortega?
Yes.
Susan Friedman?
Abstain.
Wendy Strack?
Can I do yes on the May minutes and abstain on the August minutes since I was not here in that?
It's one motion.
Oh, so it's either yes or no? Okay, then yes.
Justin Huft?
Yes.
Max Disposti?
Yes.
Chris Jones?
Yes.
John Sovek?
Yes.
Kelly Ronasinghe?
Yes.
Dr. Annette Walker?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, wonderful. Motion approved. We're moving to item 14, which has to do with my board chair reports. We did already pre-announce yesterday. We have a new board member that just joined the team. And I would like to introduce you to Eleanor and, oh, I forgot it. Eleanor Uribe, sorry. So Eleanor is joining us for her first meeting today, actually yesterday. I'm happy to announce that Eleanor Uribe has been appointed by the governor to serve as the board LCCW board member. Eleanor has been the faculty field liaison at the California State University in Fresno since 2012. She worked as a licensed clinical social worker for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation from 2008 to 2012. She was a social worker practitioner at the Fresno County Department of Social Services from 1994 to 2008. Eleanor, welcome, and you're more than welcome also to share anything you would like. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. I feel it's a privilege and honor to be here, and especially around my colleagues. And I was sharing with a friend, one of my colleagues, that it's just, I feel the responsibility, so I want to represent well. I am originally from Los Angeles. I was born in East LA, and I lived in El Monte. So my family's still there, but my extended family's in Fresno, so that's where I moved. I went to UCLA, and then that was my undergrad, and then my master's was in Fresno State. So I feel like I've been working with people probably since I was 18, and I feel like I've really gotten a perspective of a lot of people in close proximity, and I feel like, you know, I have my own experiences, and I can share some, in a sense, you know, their view on, you know, their experiences. So I feel like that's one of a big thing that I have to offer, you know, and so I'm looking forward to my time here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Uribe, and we are happy to have you, even though it already felt like it's been a long time because we had a very working day yesterday. You were being fully part of the conversation, so thank you. Thank you so much. We're really honored to have you. Moving on, we also, going over the board member attendance, we always do that also for transparency with our members and licensees, and so the report shows that the board members' attendance for the meetings and the committee which they belong to during the current fiscal year. So please, if there are any incongruences or any mistakes on the report, let the staff know so they can actually fix it for you and reach out to them after the meeting. So if there are any questions, but I don't believe that's up for discussion, right, Council? No. Future board meetings, you'll see in the material the list of the upcoming board meetings. Please note the dates of the board meetings in 2023. Future telehealth meetings dates will also be posted soon. We really make an effort to make sure that people are organizing their calendar for the following year. So the can be prepared for when the board meetings are coming up. As a reminder, our board meeting for our board members will all be in person unless things change in the future, while the committee meetings have been set up to be virtual. So for our attendees and audience, they are more than welcome to participate to the meetings virtually every single time, so to limit any possible disparities in participations and access. I would like also to move for future agenda item status also, if there are any questions or comments from the participants in the room here in Sacramento.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair,
Yes,
but
please.
could we just go back to future board meetings? I found a new insert there.
Please.
In regards to I think it's public hearings. I'm sorry, I don't see the copy in front of me, but I just wanted to clarify. If you or our executive officer could clarify those placeholder meetings?
I believe what you're referring to where we had a couple meetings scheduled for petitioner hearing meetings.
Yes.
And thank you. That was so the petitioner hearing meetings, what we're setting those up as kind of a placeholder in case we do. The effort is to make sure that we don't have petitioners waiting longer than 100 days. So we wanted to get those on your schedule. Those would be, the petitioner hearings would be a virtual meeting, and board staff will hopefully be able to tell you way in advance if we are going to meet on that date or not. So those are kind of like placeholders, so we're not, you know, for the...
And very important, so I thank you for adding that to our potential scheduling meetings and being transparent about what they are so that the public is aware of how they may work moving forward, as well as the board members. So I appreciate you.
No, thank you for asking.
Thank you. Thanks again, Dr. Walker, and thank you, Steve. On the next item, this is not a request, rightfully so. Our legal counsel was instructing me to make sure that this is not a request to put future agenda items in the agenda. This is actually to go over those agenda items that have been proposed in the past, that they are making their way through in one way or another through staff or through possible board meetings. So the report shows that if there are any questions about any agenda items that were proposed in the past that you don't see there now in the present, so that perhaps our staff can address that. And I see John Solek. Yes.
Actually, Wendy was
And Wendy.
Just a quick question then. Is there ability for discussion on these items, or is that a separate agenda item at a different time?
We can discuss, I mean, not in the merit of the single one, but either of the agenda items where they are, right, in the process.
Well, I think because this is really, I should have titled it a status of the items. I believe if there's something that is missing here, you probably, it would be better to actually address that within the future agenda items and note that. I'm not sure, is that proper? Do you think that's appropriate, or?
Right, so this is a status update, just showing you where...
There's a question about a status of it.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So I'm concerned 5621, the very first one on there was my question about gender affirming training for the staff. It's still on there, it's still pending. It's been there for quite a long time.
Okay.
I just am concerned that there's been no movement on it whatsoever.
Okay.
And also on there too, I don't know if I missed something, maybe it's going to be in your report, Steve, but it says there's going to be addressing the idea of resolutions. It's going to be presented today. Is that in your report? Because I didn't see it anywhere else on the agenda.
Yes, in the kind of we're working on that with social media and such instead of, because well, I don't know how much I can get in the discussion of this, but we will be working towards not necessarily resolutions, but for highlighting efforts of other, other institutions and such in promoting those. Because a resolution is a little bit difficult to, what's the term? Coordinate and such for the board to vote on, because it's something that the board has to vote on. And we thought it would be more appropriate to do some social media campaigns for a base example, Mental Health Month. We know that's in May, so making sure that we have a kind of that we have a social media docket to go and push out in May. The other ones that were brought up, I believe, was domestic violence, you know, looking at doing a domestic violence public service announcements on our social media and stuff.
So just because I want to be specific about this, because we brought up a lot of different ideas about ways we should recognize things that are happening in our communities. Is this the proposed process that you said that this says is being presented to the board today, or has the specific process actually been delineated? Because there's a lot of sortas and kindas in there, and it says on here a proposed process is going to be presented today, November 3rd, actually yesterday, at our board meeting.
So that is the proposed process. Staff will be working on these, and actually what we can do is bring back to the board, the next board meeting, a list of events that you would want to actually highlight. But in the meantime, I mean, I know that there's a couple that Kelly had brought up too, that we're going to look at to see and actually move forward on those and kind of work with the social media platforms. But then again, bringing it up at the board meeting to see what what things you do want to highlight in the coming months and such.
And I understand that. I also understand that resolutions may not be an appropriate mechanism simply because of the logistics of voting on something, because we have so few meetings per year. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make a motion today because it's November and we have to get started by January. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I don't think we can make a motion for that. Can I have Wendy Streck just for a second, because I know she wanted to speak as well.
I just wanted to ask a question, I guess, of council. Because of my flight schedule today, I may not be here at future agenda items. If there's something I want to add to this list, how do I go about doing that?
And you can always email staff.
Okay.
If you're not here. That goes for staff, it goes for participants, it goes for the public, it goes for all the board members. You can always email the staff, Steve, Christina. She's the one who also vets a lot of this stuff for your agendas.
Okay. If it is an item that I've previously discussed with staff offline about being a future agenda item, but is not on here, may I mention it now?
Absolutely.
Okay. I had briefly discussed with Roseanne and Steve the potential of finding some creative ways to respond to the mental health crisis that we're in now and the shortage of therapists in California. And, you know, it may or may not be something that works. You know, I'm not a clinician, so I don't know. But, you know, whether there's something like what we did in COVID, where we brought back retired doctors and nurses and stuff to respond to the medical crisis that we were facing, is there some way to do this in our context of bringing back retired therapists? And you know, this may or may not be something that is functional, but are there some creative ways that we can bring more folks to the table quickly? You know, I understand one element is the pipeline, and we're going to work on that, but that's kind of a long-term solution. So I want to look at more creative ways of how we can bring more people to the table more quickly. So.
And I can speak to that. We are actually a workforce development, and we are, you know, that's what we're going to be bringing to the licensing committee and working on that in the next January. And that's a really big concern for us. So that will be part of that discussion of how we can bring more people into the profession and what we can do to not only bring more people, but to encourage people to actually pursue the profession. It's a huge effort that we want to undertake. We need to undertake because there is a dire need. So. But we will be addressing that in our licensing committees to start up. But I can put that in there.
Okay. Yeah, can we just add that on here?
Okay.
If it's not in there, we make it pop it out a little bit more. So
the other thing, I know we started the status report, but what I've done for the strategic plan update, I'm kind of making a more robust report on that. And so these, what we try to do is fit these within our strategic plan, like that effort. So I'll try to fit that within one of our objectives. So I don't know, that will probably give you a more detailed, if we want to continue doing the status updates, that's fine. I think that would work, but will also be addressed in the strategic plan. What I'm planning to do, or if you might see, is actually giving you every month of what we're doing on those projects. So it's kind of a more robust future agenda item report. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Susan Freeman?
I just wanted to ask you, Steve, when you say a future agenda item, I mean, I think we're all aware that the future is here. We have the problem right now, and if we keep on pushing it to wait for another agenda item, I mean, what I'm wondering is, what can we do? I mean, for example, just one thing that she mentioned about getting back people who've retired or something like that. I mean, can we as a board do anything, or do we just make suggestions to people, to legislators or whatever?
I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. So, I mean, there's various things that staff maybe can do right now, but I think we take direction from the board, and we understand, you know, that we need to increase the workforce. Some of the stuff that doesn't necessarily revolve around policy with the staff, maybe sending PSAs out there saying we need, you know, more people to come back into the profession, we can do that. But some of it will require policy decisions by the board itself. And so it's kind of, also additionally, we do need the resources where staff only has a limited amount of resource to research, to bring back proposals, to look at these situations and the issues, so that we're actually providing you with the excellent information that you need to make these policy decisions. So we can't, that's my role, is to kind of try to figure out how to weigh that. You know, I mean, if the board, we can establish, I mean, one of my thoughts was some of these issues, we do have the licensing committee, we do have the, you know, the telehealth committee, but I mean, we could have a workforce development committee and we could have extra committee meetings, which would definitely help out with making and kind of formulating the decision process. So, so we definitely, it's on my radar. I mean, the workforce development is the top thing. Top things, workforce development and barriers to licensure. I mean, that's huge right now. So I work with, you know, with Roseanne and staff and Marlon to kind of figure out how we're going to attack that, you know, how we're going to look at that. And what we have to look at is the committee meetings, because that's where we actually get the work done. Some of the bigger, you know, the bigger policy decision-making processes. So I don't know if that really answered your question. It probably didn't, but.
Well, I mean, my only feeling is, and I don't know how other members of the board feel, but the future is here, and we know there's a mental health crisis, and the crisis is because there is such a shortage of therapists. And getting them, I mean, I happen to know from other work that I've done that trying to get people back who've retired is not going to solve the problem. That is not going to solve the problem. One thing that could possibly solve it is getting a lot of new people of color into schools, giving them money to go to school, and starting the process and making sure we have the people, because you can't hire what doesn't exist.
I would just...
Can't solve the problem with the people who are not qualified to get a license.
Susan, I respect that. The thing is that so now we're going in the merit of a conversation. So we're discussing the either process of how we are going to address the future agenda items. So I understand that there is so much to discuss, and I know the staff is trying to tackle, and maybe other things can be done better, but we can't go in the merit outside the agenda items to discuss how we do certain things. It's just because it's not, unless we are going to, and we have so many in the licensing committee, we've done a lot of these conversations as well, in the policy committee as well. So it's not like, I don't want to give the appearance that we're not doing anything around it. There's a lot of work has been done. It's just that we all would like to see it faster, but there's also parameters that are not part of the jurisdiction of the BBS as well, that has to do with the dynamics of disparities also in the state of California and so forth. So we can have a conversation for hours, which we will also in the next few agenda items say do address the disparity of our possible potential licensees. So I just want to make sure we reorganize the conversation, that we are just, otherwise we don't put any, you know, limits to it. And in this one, we asked our staff to have a status report of what we are. And I know that, Kelly, you were proposing a possible motion, but that's outside the parameter of a status report. It's not in the agenda, so we cannot move a motion for that.
No, I understand. What I'm going to do is isolate a future agenda item, and I'm going to make it very, very clear that that is what I'm going to be expecting from staff at the next board meeting. Keep in mind, it's November. Our next meeting is going to be in February. So at that point, we should have a very clear plan from staff as to how we are going to promulgate the future, like classic examples are Mental Health Month in May, National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month in June, National School Counseling Week, National Psychotherapy Day, and National Therapist Day. Those are 5 things just right off the top of my head that I think we can capitalize on social media to, one, you know, vitalize the pipeline, if you will, through multiple social media platforms. So that's kind of what I will be expecting from staff at the next board meeting in February. And this is not to say that staff has not been thinking about this or that executive officer has not been thinking about this. It's just that I want to get something in our hands that we can get a motion and vote on.
Okay, I appreciate that. I misunderstood that you were moving a motion right now, so that's why. Anyone else on the status report of our agenda items? I don't see anyone. Should I go to the public? At the end of your report. At the end of my report, okay. So there's a lot in there. So right now we're moving to our staff recognitions. As you know, every board meeting, most of the times actually, we have amazing staff that we recognize for their tenures under the BBS or the DCA. And I would like to congratulate a couple of our BBS staff members for achieving some milestones in their careers. I believe they are here with us today. Chris Catalano, that's been a state service for 5 years, and more than 2 of those years has been with the board as LMFT licensee evaluator. And congratulations, Chris. Are you here? They're not here? None of them? Well, they can watch us. Alex Juarez has been in state service for 10 years and has been with the board for more than a year as an enforcement analyst. And previously, Alex worked for the Board of Optometry. Congratulations, Alex, if you're watching us. Thank you so much for your service here. Dawn Herrera has been working as the board budget analyst since 2008 and has been in state service for more than 25 years. Before coming to the board, Dawn worked for the Board of Pharmacy. Thank you all. Thank you for our staff and for your hard work and dedication. We are now moving to our agenda 15, which is the Department of Consumer Affairs update. I believe we have, who's doing the update? Mary Catherine. Mary Catherine? Is she in the room? Or is she connecting the WebEx?
Hold on, she should be. Hold on. I guess Mary Catherine is not here. We'll get back to it? Okay, we'll see. Okay, then we are holding the item, just in case you say, yeah, the item 15 for the Department of Consumer Affairs update. So we're moving to our item 16, which is the discussion and possible action regarding the acceptance of the Association of Marriage and Family Therapists Regulatory Board clinical examinations for the California licensures. And I believe we have a presentation first. We do. Just to give you a little bit of background out for the audience, last year the board asked OPES, the Office of Professional Examination Services, to review the Association of MFT Regulatory Board's clinical exam, to determine whether it would be appropriate for use in licensure for California. In the review, the OPES looked at the AMFTRB clinical exams occupational analysis, examination development and scoring, passing score and passing rates, and additionally the test administration and test security procedures to see if those components met the professional guidelines and technical standards in the Standards of Educational Psychological Testing, that's a 2014 standard, and additionally the Business and Profession Codes 139. OPES is here today to present some material on that, I believe, or no? No, they're not. So, okay, OPES, they might be here if there's questions that come up. OPES did note that there were some variances in the scope of the administration. The national exam tests broad competency related to practice, whereas the state exam tests competency specific to California. And additionally, the AMFTRB exam is offered a little bit differently than California, where there is, California is a constant, our clinical exam that we developed, you can take it at any time. AMFTRB issues the exam 1 week a month, and then scores are held. So it does offer a little bit different, you know, it's a different process than we're used to in California. So board members were presented material by OPES concerning the AMFTRB clinical exam. And so at really this point, what we're here today is kind of making a decision on whether the board feels it's appropriate to, you know, move forward with an AMFTRB exam, the clinical exam for licensure in California, or if that's something that we do not want to pursue. And if you would like to continue, you know, looking at the AMFTRB clinical exam, that's something that you can maybe direct staff to work with OPES and AMFTRB to maybe address some of the, concerns that there might be, and seeing if it is, you know, working through those, and then coming to a conclusion if you can deem it's appropriate later on. So just as a heads up, I think, did you have?
Thank you. No. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, before we open the conversation, there was a contest as well. Do we have anyone also presenting more in the merit, or just?
That's it. I guess just board discussion. And just to highlight, we wanted to make sure that, yes, I think it was been a lot of this stuff, because there was confidential information shared yesterday, really we're just kind of, do we want to move forward? And if so, do we want staff to, or do you want staff to kind of look and work with OPES and AMFTRB to kind of look at some of those issues that you or may have identified? So
wonderful. Thank you, Steve. So any comments or inputs from the board in regards to this? Yes, Kelly.
So we had a very robust discussion yesterday. Business and Professions Code 139 governs occupational analysis and examination validation studies, and as noted previously, the OPES report was excellent. A dimension which is highly relevant to the decision-making of the board is the impact of the integration of such a national examination upon marginalized communities and communities which are not traditionally represented in therapy. The board should know, California has the highest employment of marriage and family therapists, really in the country. They are traditionally, as with many clinicians, not well represented in rural communities. They are represented in high-density metropolitan areas without the highest wages. Statistically, those are Long Beach and San Diego. Areas of California, such as Inyo, Mono, Humboldt, and Mendocino, have little, if any, LMFTs. In fact, in rural communities, tribal communities, for instance, Idaho and Alaska, the level of LMFTs is not even statistically recognizable. Now, we know that the demographic spread of LMFTs in California is already disparate. We use CAHPS's own demographic survey from 2015. 6% of LMFTs were Black or African American. More than 60% were white. A paltry 1.6% of LMFTs were American Indian or Alaska Native. It is very important that the board consider the disparate impact that could occur from integration of a national AMFT examination before we take one step further. We certainly do not want to see any further disparate impact when we already have a disparate impact. Without that data, it is my position the board cannot make an informed decision. That's all. That's what I'm going to say.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thanks for opening the conversation. Are there any other comments, inputs from the board before I open to the public? And we can come back to the board as well, so it's not just one way, but I just want to make sure. Oh, yes. Justin
Haft.
I want to echo what Kelly is saying, and I want to add that I'm also not clear that an exam at all is the best thing to address huge racial disparities in receiving mental health care or who's providing mental health care. And so I want us to also consider, as we move forward, an option not just of getting more demographic information to pursue a possible national exam, but also considering whether or not we want to have a clinical exam in the existing state it looks like.
Thank you, Justin. Dr. Walker.
Thank you, sir. I would further add that we look at gaps in the information that is provided in these presentations to the board. It's just disappointing and almost impossible for us to make an informed decision without having relevant information, as well as if you don't or cannot provide us data specific that we've requested, then I would ask that you use your own language to interpret what we need. For example, if we're measuring validity and someone is presenting on that, and that's what we're making a decision on, then we need to somehow integrate content and competency in those conversations, and not just verbally, but in written form, so that we can make the public and our constituents and the people that we serve, our consumers, very aware of what you're sharing with us in a way that they can understand it as well. And if we're perplexed, and I would imagine that the public is too, and it's our job to protect them and make it very clear to them that we understand what their needs are and that we're addressing those needs. And the information that has come back to us has left gaps in the conversation and just addressing the real questions that were mentioned by some of my colleagues already this morning. So I think that's what I wanted to just add to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. Any other comments from members of the board? Okay, I will, at this point, open to the public and then come back to the board. Yes, Justin, yes.
Sorry, one more thing, because I want to build up Dr. Walker's piece. I want to caution us against using language that appears like it's objective and neutral. When we're saying we're measuring competence, when we're saying we're measuring objective pieces, we're not. We're measuring proximity to whiteness. We're measuring the ability for therapists to use traditionally white approaches to therapy. And so I would hope that as we move forward and look at a possible re-exam or restructuring the exam, we are not falling into this trap of using a facade of objectivity, because we are not objective in how this exam looks right now, and it has little to no bearing on what therapy looks like in the real world.
Thank you. Anyone else? I will suggest to open to the members of the public. They are present here in the room, and then we'll move in on the audience. Introduce yourself. Thank you, Ben.
Good morning, Ben Caldwell, MFT. Thank you for these fantastic comments. In light of the ASWB report, which I know is on the agenda for later today, I went looking for disparity data on the national MFT exam and on the California MFT clinical exam. No data on either one appears to exist, because AMFTRB doesn't appear to publish it, and to the best of my knowledge, OPES doesn't even gather it in the exam process. However, a research team led by Kevin Linus and Diane Gayhart have been looking into it, and using a survey of examinees, they have found patterns of racial disparity in outcomes on both of those exams, both the national MFT exam and the California MFT clinical exam, that closely aligns with what we've seen on the ASWB clinical exam and the EPPP in psychology. For both MFT exams, California and national, the single strongest predictor of passing wasn't preparation or program accreditation or even perceived understanding of the material. It was, by a wide margin, whether the examinee was Black. White examinees had a pass rate above 80%. For Black examinees, it was about 50%. This isn't a reason to not make the switch. There doesn't appear to be any evidence that either of those exams is better than the other in this regard. It's just a request that whatever you decide to do in moving forward on questions around clinical exams, you do it with equity and fairness at the forefront. whatever exam, or more ideally, no exam, you choose to utilize, I hope that you will demand better from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Is anyone else in the audience here in Sacramento? Yes.
Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California chapter. I just want to support the colleagues, my colleague Ben Caldwell's comments, because as you know, we're going to discuss the ASWB issue later, but this problem of racial disparities in exams is very serious, and in light of our workforce shortage, we really need to look at them in a different light and using all the data and get more data for every exam. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience before we open to the WebEx? Okay, moderator, if you could please help us to go out or to have any public comments. Thank you.
We are now accepting public comment via WebEx. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And I just saw a bunch of hands lower and turn into comments. All right, I'll try and deal. First on the line, Mary Kate Jones. Bear with us just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. All right, Mary Kate Jones, we've sent you a request to unmute your microphone.
This was to let you know that I was on the line to provide the DCA update. Unfortunately, I don't have a comment on this agenda item, but whenever you'd like me to give that DCA update, I'm here and willing to do so. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Noted.
Next on the list, Kathy Atkins. We've sent you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Great. This is Kathy Atkins from CAMFT. I had two comments. One, I wanted to echo what has been brought up by Ben Caldwell and Rebecca from NASW. We sent in a letter articulating the similar concerns regarding racial disparities in the standardized testing that are being seen and discovered. And so I think they both spoke to it, so I would just, again, echo their thoughts as far as the concerns and need to research and analyze. And I think those concerns and asks are spelled out in the various letters submitted. And then second, as to the national exam generally, CAMFT has long asked for a continued and increased review and assessment of the national exam to be used in California to better assist California MFTs with various federal positions that look to the national and require the national exam. So we at CAMFT are advocating for a move to the national exam, but with that caveat that has been brought by Ben and Rebecca, that it be done with an assessment and review and discussion of concerns relating to the racial disparities that do seem to be present and ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we have Tracy. Hold on just a moment, Tracy. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. Okay, Tracy, we're going to send you a second request to unmute your microphone. And sometimes it helps to cycle the screen. Sometimes that prompt can get buried. Wonderful.
Good morning. This is Dr. Tracy Montez, the former chief.
Moderator, it doesn't come through.
Tracy, you're very quiet, and apparently the room can't hear you at all. Can you get closer to the microphone, perhaps?
I can. Can you hear me now?
No.
Very quiet. The room is still having difficulty hearing you.
Why don't you go to the next commenter and I'll see if I can adjust my settings.
Okay.
Perfect.
Now
Oh, that's wonderful.
Oh, now you can hear me. Okay,
Yes.
great. Good morning. This is Dr. Tracy Montez, former division chief of the program
Nope.
policy review.
You disappeared
Moderator,
again,
just,
Tracy.
yeah.
Go on to the next commenter and let me see if I can adjust my settings, please.
Will do.
Right. She's going to join us later for the next comment. Got it.
Oh. All right. Tracy's going to try again in a moment. Next, we're moving on to John DeLine. Hold on just a moment, please. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
DeLine. I am a first-year MFT student, and I wanted to kind of reiterate some of the things that have been said, especially about the disparity of the test, and would hope that maybe in the future we can look into other ways to test for that sort of competency for licensure that doesn't have a negative connotation towards race or class. And I also wanted to bring up my support to changing to the national licensing exam, just because I feel like with the low numbers of therapists that it might be helpful to have a national exam here in California, so it's easier that we can bring new therapists in, not just with therapists like myself who are studying to become one. And that's all I'll say for now, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Moderator, do we have more comments?
We're going to cycle back to Tracy if she's still with us. Hold on just a moment, please.
Good morning. How is this?
Wonderful.
Perfect.
I love technology. Dr. Tracy Montez, former Division Chief of Programs and Policy Review. I am now the Executive Officer of the Dental Board of California. Switching technology has been challenging, as we know. But I did want to comment, since I was part of this project. I believe that it's really important for the board members to know that the California exam does follow professional standards, as was shared with you yesterday, and that one of those standards is fairness. And just as we work to make sure that the test is valid and reliable, we also, OPS works to make sure that it is fair. We are not permitted by government code to collect demographic information upon licensure. That is very clear. And so we have to take steps to address any disparity or inequity through the development of the exam. And that starts with the occupational analysis, ensuring that we have a sample, a substantive sample. That's why it's very important that professionals complete that occupational analysis when it is sent, the survey. We also utilize a diverse group of subject matter experts. We have editor review for comments, language used, and we also monitor statistics. So we do a number of steps to attempt any potential disparity or inequity issues. And we are happy to explore how to collect that data in a manner that is appropriate given government codes and the potential to keep it separate. We want it separate from licensing decisions. That's very important, and that's why we have that government code. So we will certainly, or OPS, and the department will work with our boards and bureaus to be sensitive to these types of analyses that are being performed. But I really want to, again, make the board aware that as these associations collect the data, especially if it's on a voluntary basis, we have to remember that sometimes the data can be skewed. Now, if there are mechanisms in place for that data to be collected across all candidates for licensure, then we're going to have more robust analyses. But again, just like with remote proctoring, when everybody started doing it in response to the pandemic, we saw some very serious issues with artificial intelligence and fairness and a number of those issues. So just as we begin looking at demographic data and making these kinds of assessments, I would encourage the board to be cautious with that. We
Right.
are
I would,
very
I'm sorry to
sensitive.
interrupt you, but we went on 3 minutes. I want to be fair to everyone that's speaking, so I want to make sure that
Thank
we
you.
are on
I
time.
will conclude.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Moderator, are there any other comments?
Those are all of our requests for comments at the moment. Would you like to return to the agenda?
Yes. Yes, thank you. Okay, we're back to the discussion. Sai, are there any other comments from our board? And yes, Kelly, and then John Savek, and then Susan, and then Justin. Okay.
Yeah, yes, I would like to discuss the public comment that was just made, because that has to be the most patronizing thing I've ever heard. It is entirely permissible for OPS to use alternative data sources to discuss demographic and disparate impact. And regarding the significant fairness and equality parameters that were discussed, they appear to be an absolute dismal failure, because 1.6% of MFTs are American Indian or Alaska Native, and 6% of LMFTs are Black or African American. So the fairness parameters and statistical analysis, which appear to be placed by OPS's analysis, don't appear to be working very well. In addition, it is important for the board to have this information, particularly in closed session where it can be discussed outside of a public setting, to make an informed decision. I'm just very frustrated and somewhat appalled that there would be an apologist for reinforcing structural racism because it is beneficial to the 66% of potential LMFTs who are white.
Thank you, Kelly. I believe next was John Savek, and then this side, right?
You're gonna pass.
Yes. Oh, you'll pass. Okay, I think that's both. Susan, and then Justin, right? Yeah.
I have a feeling that even though we're not allowed to collect this information, we have some information right now that is very frightening. And if that information gets out to the public, I promise you, there is going to be a hue and cry like you have never heard. And we cannot sit here as a board and say, okay, we're thinking about it. We have a committee that's looking into it. We have to make a decision, and I think we have to make a decision now to say what we are going to do. I mean, my suggestion is, and one of the letters actually suggested that they would contribute to the cost of doing something. My suggestion is that we find a person who is a DEI expert, diversity, equity, and whatever it is, yes. And we also have therapists who can look at this exam, and we have people who, or somebody who is trained in writing these exams. Now, I know that the SAT had this problem earlier, and it might not be a bad idea to consult them and find out who they consulted, because they had a huge problem, and they apparently solved it because universities are using that exam again. But I'm worried that when the public just gets a smidgen of information about this, we are going to be under enormous pressure to have an answer for what we have just thought about doing, because we can't say we have a committee looking into it. That would be the worst answer.
Justin Haft. Thank you, Susan. Oh, and then Abigail. You were first, right, Abigail? No. Okay.
Yeah, I think Kelly said it very well. We simply cannot say that this is fair when it has clear, disproportionate impacts across both who is providing care and who is receiving care. And to Susan's point, I think universities across the country are dropping the SAT because of structural racist problems. But I want to echo Kelly's comments.
Abigail Ortega, thank you, Jess.
Just wondering, it seems like there's a ceiling, right? And it's the code, the state code. And so how can we break that ceiling and ask OPS, right, to give us solidity with everything incorporated into it? Because the conversation about the national versus the state, like, that we're not able to reach a decision on that until we, right, complete the other conversation. And so how can we now have a new conversation around that, around those laws?
Do I hear a motion, Abigail?
Do I hear a motion?
I'm not forcing you to. I'm just saying I didn't know if you were making a proposal for the action today to
yes, to not make a decision.
Okay.
Right. First of all, on the state or national, like, postpone this conversation, and well, that's the motion. But it's two parts, right? And to create a new conversation focused on breaking that glass ceiling, like, it's all made up, right? So how can we disrupt that?
Okay. So I'm just in trying, and please let me know if I'm wrong, interpreting also the sentiment is coming from the board, which I also share. I think definitely this conversation, I think I shared it yesterday, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It cannot be disconnected from the concerns that we have about the disparity that we've seen in some data that came in. We definitely need more data. This is not even close enough for us to, it's not even about this, decision made national versus state. It just, both of them need to be re-evaluated and look into a conversation with lenses that are a little bit more inclined to look at the disparities and finally addressing the issues at the roots, because making a decision nowadays, I think it's not, we just don't have the resources to do that. And from what I hear from the colleagues, in addition to that, they're actually questioning about even the utility of some of the state exams altogether. So I feel that we are not in the position to make a position that's pro or against. Definitely, though, it is a conversation needs to be continued to have, and I do believe that the committee, like a licensing committee, can continue to push for more data and see and evaluate what can be done in regards to follow up with the conversation today. So perhaps if there even is a motion is to move this, not the decision, remember, the board makes the final decisions about this. It's just to continue the conversation of the data, even in the committees and the board session, so that we don't take any official decision today.
And we don't need a motion for the work to continue. We don't need a motion for it to go to a committee. I think you were going to go back out for a clarification on the public comment also before we move on.
Okay, so we have clarification on public comments. Did I convey properly what the sentiment of the board, John Sabeck?
I know my fellow board members are probably wondering why I've been so quiet today. In our closed session yesterday, it was quite passionate. No, it's not about early. It's about yesterday was quite passionate for many of us in the closed session. For me, if I come back to just the question of this item is using the national AMFT exam, I am absolutely opposed to it because of what we learned in our closed session yesterday. AMFTRB has not been transparent in sharing information with us in a way that could allow us to even consider bringing them to the table. I feel my hands are tied because there was NDA that had to be signed to even access the most basic information about their testing style and how it would match up with California. And I don't think in any way, shape, or form we can accept any possibility of working with them at this point until we have more. We've also been really, really direct with OPEES about questions that we have. And we have had those questions sidelined and sidelined and sidelined. We found out that one of our most basic questions about what they're measuring, what competency actually means, what we're looking for, wasn't even asked. And this is a real concern to me. So for right now, I actually would like to make a motion that we do not accept the AMFTRB testing things for licensure for the state of California.
I would second that motion, and the basis for my seconds, I would join with my colleagues' arguments, but also because of the lack of information provided to the board related to the disparate impact, potential disparate impact of the AMFT, whether or not it would reinforce structural racism, which already exists, and also just the very basic impact upon rural communities. Just these three fundamental questions. I would second the motion.
I just have a question. In my perceived public perceptions of it, which is also my own, if you reject a proposal, it might validate actually and put a shadow on the disparities that we know exist for the state exam. So I'm concerned that this will be, because obviously we're not ready to vote that, but a no vote will put a yes on the rest of it, which we don't have enough information even to do that. So that's what my concern is. It is a work in progress. So that's why I'm saying I know right now could be projecting that, validate the opposite.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. I'm thinking along the same lines, and I don't know if you need to address this to council or you, but I would amend the motion because I think what's missing is that we are continuing the conversation, but it's not just continuing it, it's the shift, given what we learned or didn't learn up until this moment. And so I think the conversation needs to shift so that they are addressing the most relevant questions, which happen to be the most basic questions, like are they addressing cultural competency and how? What does that look like? So, and I think it's the board's responsibility to shape and shift that conversation. So if we do have a motion on the floor, I would move with this motion with an amendment that we shift the conversation, but I don't know the language to use, and maybe council could help us with that.
So if I may, since I put the motion out, thank you for that, I think that makes sense, is at this time to not accept the AMFT for California license and to direct OPES to gather information based on the questions we brought up in closed session. I specifically do not want us to
legal? Okay.
What were you gonna, sorry, Kelly.
No,
I was reaching the same time you were reaching.
I think you may have the same issue. Let me go ahead.
So that would be to direct staff to continue that, working with OPES.
Right.
Okay. And then we have to make sure that the second accepts the amendment.
Second accepts, and I would second the amended motion.
Thank you.
Can we repeat the motion first for a second, because for the public and the record? Sabina or John?
Could you put it in legal?
Yeah.
I don't have any better words than the rest of you. So we're declining the use of the the Association of Marriage and Family Therapists Regulatory Board's clinical examination for California licensure, as well as directing staff to continue to work with the Office of Professional Examination Services to address the concerns that were brought up in closed session yesterday, as well as anything additional that was discussed today.
Wonderful. And now we have a motion on the floor. Was moved by John Savick and second by whom? Was it? Do we have a second? Kelly. Thank you. Both. Since we have a motion on the floor, I reopen the discussion. Any other inputs from the board before I go to the public? We're good. Anyone from the audience here in Sacramento? Any comments on the motion?
Thank you, Ben Caldwell, MFT. I really appreciate the board's discussion on this. And it's just a question. I don't have a preferred answer to it, but so the question about like, is a rejection vote going to forestall conversation? Is there any way to utilize this process with AMFTRB to demand that they produce more data, or is it more that that ship has sailed? That the efforts have been made, and at this point, you're not optimistic that there's more to be gained by continued engagement there? Thank you.
I mean, that's another way to direct staff to work with, instead of an override just rejection of the exam, is to, keep investigating and working with AMFTRB and OPS to see if they can address those concerns.
I think we were also made aware that AMFTRB, hopefully I got that right, was not necessarily transparent or voluntary in providing the information that was requested.
Yeah. Yeah. So since we have a motion on the floor, is that okay from those that moved the motion? Is that okay to add that language or no? Okay.
You don't have to. It's your motion.
Yeah. Okay. On lieu of bank comments. Right. So in the concern of making sure that the conversation wasn't shut to that, that's what. So we leave it, the motion the way it is. Oh, yes, hold on.
Mr. Chair, I guess the question is at any time AMFTRB could come back and approach us with a willingness to be a better partner. So that's the ball's kind of in their court to come back and be a better partner. But I think at this point, the board has offered our thoughts on how we want to move forward with starting to address the systemic issue, and maybe in some ways we need to take a look at our own exam and how we can make some changes there. And then if AMFTRB wants to be a partner, they're certainly always welcome at the table.
And that's what with a no vote, it's kind of you're already setting up the precedence where we're saying we're not worried, we're not going to use your exam, and then we're coming to them and asking them, can we work with you to address these? I mean, I don't know.
I think it doesn't close the door forever, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure they're listening.
Yeah, that's true too.
I'm sure there's going to be feedback, and maybe when they want to come, maybe they're going to go back to the drawing table and come back to the board with more information. Maybe they'll ask to do a presentation. Maybe they'll want to partner in the future. It doesn't mean if you say no today, it's forever.
Good point. Stronger.
Right. So the motion stands. I know that Justin Haft, right? No, we're good? Okay. I would like to, John Salek.
So I just want to address some of this too, and I understand it's taken a while for me to kind of get a grip on how bureaucracy works. And at the same time, sometimes we have to make statements. And for me, this is a moment to start making a statement. We have lots of, well, we could, or sort of, or we're shutting the door and want to have more conversations. What we understand is they just really did not want to provide the information. The questions weren't asked in the way we needed. Once again, if we're going to move this to very basic definitions, which go to this whole overarching conversation, need to be realigned. And for me, it is about saying, no, we're actually going to make a statement right now, and we're going to work with it, and then we're going to see how the conversation starts to shift. Yeah. I think sometimes we get caught up in the like, well, we could, and we should wait, and let's discuss, and let's committee and all of that. Sometimes, for me personally, I need to make a statement, and that's what my motion is based on.
Okay. I think then, Abigail?
Yeah, I think for me, my only concern is, like, okay, we say no to the national, right, or like not making it about OPS, but like, how are we going to collect this data if there's a law impeding that at the state level? So, like, not ending this conversation with them, but like, how can we still have the conversation, because we still have a state exam that's biased, that there's still an issue, or we're assuming there's an issue, right? And so I still want us to move forward with that, with or without, that national exam. And so, yeah, can that be added to our future?
That's what I thought.
Is that part of the motion?
That's part of the motion. We're shifting the conversation.
We're shifting the conversation.
And I believe the
Because
state.
there's a lot of focus on OPS, and I don't want it to be like it's them, just like in general.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm sorry, I hadn't completed, John. Yes, what were you saying? Okay.
I think, are you talking about like with our exams too, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, it's broader, yeah, okay,
Yes.
yeah, no, that's what.
Okay, I will invite to go and see if there are any public comments. Again, for other members of the public, they are present. Are there any other comments before I go to our webinar? Okay, we're good. Moderator, can you please open for public comments, please? Thank you.
We are accepting public comments via WebEx on the motion. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users or anyone else, please raise your hand by dialing *3. And we have a hand raised from Dr. Tracy Montez. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify my earlier statements.
It's not coming through, moderator.
Dr. Montez, whatever you were doing before that made it louder, can you do that again, please?
Well, I haven't changed any settings. Can you hear me?
Just a little bit. We can try.
In the room?
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify my passion for my earlier statements. First of all, we completely support equal opportunity into the profession. We do not want exams with any kind of disparate impact. That is extremely important. For those board members who are new, I have about 30 years of experience as a psychometrician. I was selected last year by Chief Justice Guerrero to sit on the Blue Ribbon Commission for the future of the State Bar exam, where we are looking at diversity issues and disparate impact. Very important. So I just want to reassure the board that you have a strong licensing exam. And yes, there are some differences in passing rates, but that is something that we can explore. And I want to reassure you that the department and the director is aware of the conflicting or the code and the ability to collect that data and how to be responsive. So please know that we are working at an executive level to address how we can collect this data in a fair manner that doesn't impact licensing decisions in terms of keeping the data separate, but being responsive in exam development. And again, please be reassured that you have qualified psychometricians that are developing your exam and monitoring it and doing everything we can to provide good service and not create barriers to licensure. So again, I just want to reassure you that these are important topics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moderator, are there any other comments?
Yes,
Otherwise,
we
we'll
have
get back
a
to the
request
motion.
from Kathy Atkins. Bear with us just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, thank you. This is Kathy Atkins with CAMT. I want to thank everyone for the discussion. I'm kind of taking notes and processing, so I appreciate the different viewpoints and vantage points. I just wanted to encourage the board to not end this assessment or dialogue or discussion. I think the conversation, be it either the national exam or the state exam. You know, it's been brought up, the disparities, and so I hope this discussion and research continues regardless of what exam is pursued or not pursued. I also hope that the board continues to be open-minded depending on how the national group, if and when they come back with responses to the questions raised by the BBS. I do think it does have an impact nationwide. California's participation nationwide as an MFT. So I do think there could potentially be unintended consequences or things that can be improved for jobs for California MFTs with the national exam. And so I hope, as Roseanne sort of mentioned, that this doesn't fall off the radar, but it's a continued discussion if they are open to reaching out and being more transparent. I also, lastly, I recognize sounds like a lot of discussion happened in a closed door, which I appreciate and can respect, but at the same time, you know, I'm trying to think of ways CAMF can advocate on this, but it's challenging when organizations don't know what we could advocate for. So I don't know if there's any wiggle room that the board can consider down the road to share with organizations of things that that the national group could provide, or that CAMP or other organizations could advocate to obtain, because we would love to be a partner and try to get information, but you know, we don't know sort of what was not provided, and certainly CAMP can reach out on our own. But I would love to see the associations help with these issues of advocacy, transparency, but it's, you know, I'm sort of trying to guess what it might be. So if there is any way to find out, again, I know you can't declassify suddenly, but just food for thought on ways that the associations can help with this issue. And again, thank you all for your conversation.
Thank you. Any other public comments, moderator?
There are no other requests for public comment at the moment.
Okay, wonderful. There is one back. We're back in the room, so I'm going to see if there are any comments. I see Ray San. Please come forward and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hi, Karen Okosich with the Office of Professional Examination Services. I just want to clarify that I don't know that characterizing AMFTRB's responses as non-transparent is accurate. I'm just not convinced that some of the questions that the board was raising yesterday, I don't know that that data was available. So OPS is very willing to continue to work with the board and work with AMFTRB to see if we can get those questions answered and bring this back for further discussion.
Okay, thank you. I saw on hands. Oh,
yeah, I had
Eleanor.
Before we make a vote, I would like the motion repeated, please, because it was a lot.
Sure, we can do that. Absolutely. Can we please go ahead at this point, Sabina?
I don't know if I can do it exactly
By the letter.
same. So from what I gather, or what I remember, is the motion is to decline the acceptance of the Association of Marriage and Family Therapists Regulatory Board's clinical examination for California licensure, as well as direct staff to continue to work with the Office of Professional Examination Services to address all the concerns that were brought up yesterday in closed session, as well as anything additional that was brought up today concerning the California licensure examination.
Perfect. You did even better than before. So we have a motion on the floor from John Savek, second by Kelly Ranasinghe. Any other discussion before we go to vote? Was that, Eleanor, that came clear?
Yeah, that was clear. Well, we probably are not open to comment anymore, right?
No, we do. The motion's on the floor, so it's still open.
Yeah, I understand that I would say there was a lot of work done, and there's a need, and there's a lot probably that could be done. So I would just say there's definitely a need for working with cultural experts, and I would say that maybe not just one, I would say multiple. So and even schools. So But, yeah, okay, yeah.
No, thank you, thank you. Until we vote, the conversation is still open, so just, but it looks like we are good to go. I'm just reading the room, and it looks like there are not any other comments. At this point, I would like to call the motion for a vote. Christine, thank you.
I'm going to start over here with Dr. Annette Walker.
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe.
Yes.
John Sovek.
Yes.
Chris Jones.
Yes.
Max Disposti.
Yes.
Justin Huft.
Yes.
Wendy Strack.
Yes.
Susan Friedman.
Yes.
Abigail Ortega.
Yes.
Eleanor Uribe.
Yes.
And motion carries.
Wonderful, thank you. And before we go to the next agenda item, I would like to ask for a 10-minute break. Is that not okay? Oh, okay. I was like, 10 minutes break, and it's 10:30. At 10:40, we are resuming. Thank you so much. Good morning again. We are resuming our Board of Behavioral Sciences. Today is November 4th, and the time is 10:42 a.m. My name is Max Disposti, pronouns AMS, Board Chair of the Board of Behavioral Sciences. I believe that we skipped our DCA presentations because we couldn't connect, so we would like to go back, and just for the sake of records, the items for the presentation is, give me a second. It was item 15, Department of Consumer Affairs updates. Moderator, if we can connect, you can connect us, and we will have the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much. My name is Mary Kate Cruz Jones, and I'm providing this update on behalf of the Executive Office. So thanks for allowing me this opportunity. I appreciate being able to be in the virtual room. So thanks for circling back.
You're welcome.
First, I'd like to welcome Member Uribe as the newest addition to the Board of Behavioral Sciences. Congratulations on your appointment, and thank you very much for your willingness to serve. We are very excited to announce that the governor most recently appointed a new Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations, Melissa Geer. She joined the department on October 3rd and brings a wealth of experience. She previously served as the Chief Deputy Legislative Director at the Department of Insurance since 2014, and she also served as the California State Teachers Retirement System and worked at the California Attorney General's office as the legislative analyst office. In terms of other news within DCA, Director Kimberly Kirkmeyer established the department's first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee to guide the department in its equity strategy, initiatives, and action plans. This committee will hold its official kickoff meeting next week on November 9th, 2022. In accordance with Governor Newsom's executive order, strategic plans in effect July 2023 and beyond must be developed or updated to more effectively advance equity and drive outcomes that increase opportunity for all. In response, DCA is revising its strategic plan processes to incorporate more inclusive public engagement, data analysis, and embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion into the strategic plan process. Over the coming months, the DEI committee will inform the strategic planning processes, and by March 2023, DCA will be implementing the revised processes and working with boards in updating existing strategic plans or developing new strategic plans. So that's something exciting that's coming up. Currently, something that has started, it's that time of year again. DCA is excited to take part in Our Promise, California State Employees Giving at Work. We've been doing this for 65 years and are so happy to be caring for California. This year's Our Promise Vice Chair is Lourdes Castro Ramirez, the Secretary of Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. as well as DCA, Our Promise co-chairs are the Chief Deputy Director, Ms. Christine Lally, and Deputy Director Melissa Gear. The campaign began on August 1st and will end on December 31st. This campaign allows Californians to donate to a nonprofit or nonprofits of their choice. With your assistance, DCA hopes to continue its tradition of generosity and caring for our communities through this year's campaign. So please assist us in spreading the word and encouraging all members and staff to make a one-time donation or donate online through Cal Employee Connect. California can be cared for as little as $5 a month. Just a quick note about COVID and COVID-19 safety measures, an update here. So though legislation has passed allowing remote meetings through June 30th, 2023, there are boards like yourself today that are choosing to hold in-person meetings. And so we just want to quickly go over some safety practices, best measures, and recommendations for those public meetings. So when planning for those upcoming meetings, we ask you to remember that board and staff are expected to follow the state and local public health guidelines that apply to the area where meetings are being held. CDPH also released updated guidance for the use of face masks, so please refer to this ahead of time to determine whether it's appropriate to use masks. And if masks are recommended for the meeting location, please post face covering guidance signage at your meeting at the check-in or entrance. And just a quick note here about board member travel. This will probably apply to you, many of you today. As travel begins to pick up, it's important to remember that state arrangements must be made through DCA's approved travel agency, CalTravelStore, or Concur. All board members and staff must use the most economical fares possible when traveling by air for official state business. So typically, this will be Southwest's Wanna Get Away option. However, there may be additional charges if changes are made to the flight. Flight changes related to date and time for personal convenience are not approved or a justified reason, and the travel will be responsible for any associated charges. Additionally, AB 1887 prohibits state agencies, departments, boards, authorities, and commissions from traveling to states that are subject to California's travel ban. And I just wanted to remind you that there are currently 23 prohibited states. And if you'd like a more comprehensive list of what these states are, you can find that on the Attorney General's website. And just a quick thought about DCA's partnership with the State Controller's Office. We wanted to share, this is good information for consumers and certain licensees about Unclaimed Property Program. So the state law requires banks, insurance companies, corporations, and other entities to report and submit their customers' property to the State Controller's Office after a period of inactivity, which is generally about 3 years. Certain DCA licensees will benefit from this partnership as it will educate them about their responsibility to report unclaimed property and assist with compliance. Additionally, this program is a great resource for all consumers to locate their unclaimed property. So that's my last update for today. And as always, DCA is here to help. If there's anything that we can do to assist, please feel free to reach out for us. We're here for you. And if there's nothing else, I'll conclude here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And just for the sake of clarity too, if there are any questions from our board member to the presentation. I'm looking. No, doesn't look like. Moderator, can you please open to the public to see if there are any questions?
We are now taking public comment on the DCA update. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take about 15 seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, thank you. And since I skipped the audience that is present here, just a little shout out if there are any comments. It doesn't look like, and I believe our Eleanor, did you?
No, I was just going to say thank you for the welcome. And for those of you who might want to know, it's Eleanor Uribe, if you want to try doing that, or you can say Uribe. So thank you.
Uribe. Thank you, Eleanor. And thank you for the presentation. Again, it looks like we don't have any questions, so we appreciate your time, and thanks a lot.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, moderator. And we're now moving on to our next agenda item, which is the presentation by Department of Consumer Affairs Office of Professional Examination Services regarding the remote proctoring of examinations. Hello there. Here we are, present in the room. Introduce yourself, and hopefully the mic works.
Yeah, audio check. Are we good?
Yes, it's good to go.
All right. Do I have my slide behind me? Sort of. But what we're going to get?
It's coming through.
Can I just actually do a little introduction to, this was brought up because the National Board of Clinical Counselors has actually started online proctoring of their NCMHCE exam. California candidates can now actually take the exam online through NBCC. So OPS wanted to make a presentation just to give you some more information about the proctoring, online proctoring, and their thoughts on that. And there you go. Thank you.
All right, we'll go with it. Hello, my name is Robert Calvert. I work with OPS, as says the sign behind me. Dr. Heidi Lenser is here with me, and we're going to give a relatively brief presentation on remote proctoring, which is mostly going to focus on mitigating the risks of remote proctoring. So with that said, if we can get next slide. My slides don't go.
We see it.
Great. OPS, which you've heard a lot today, I'm not here for that, has two major purposes. One of them is that we consult with you on items that relate to licensure exams. So we exist to try to be your expert in that subject. And the second is that we're going to make recommendations based on kind of the standard way of operating our regulations, procedures, et cetera, to be in line with the law, but also just kind of best practices. So we are here to serve you and give you information, both from a stats point of view, but also from, as has been discussed, other interests and concerns. Next slide, please.
Yeah,
who's on?
Good to go.
Yeah, I just can't. Yeah,
you can see it.
So with that said, we want to find a reliable method of identifying practitioners who are able to practice safely and competently, and that's with the board's interest, that's within our interest, that's the purpose for our exams, and that these focus on entry level. So I'm just kind of giving an idea of why we exist and why these licensure exist. It is absolutely, and we want to keep in mind, entry level knowledge for the purpose of protection of the public, as was mentioned at the beginning of the board meeting. With that said, to the point, our policy, oh, sorry, next slide. Our policy states clearly that we don't recommend remote proctoring. With that said, it's already happened. So within national examinations, we exist to evaluate the risks, see how it's being done, and talk to you about what our views on that are. And that's where we're coming in here. I'm going to talk briefly about different ways remote proctoring can work and ways that we can attempt to mitigate some of those risks. Next slide, please. This is a rough overview of where I'm going. I'm going to talk about different types of remote proctoring. There are different ways exams can be proctored remotely. Some of these are clearly better than others. We'll spend some time defining those. We'll talk about some of the risks that relate to remote proctoring for licensure examinations. And then finally, we're going to talk about ways that we can mitigate those risks for you to evaluate what a national exam is doing, just to give you more information. Next slide, please. This is kind of a orienting slide where risks are high, and its cheat is high. So when we're talking about a national exam, we're talking about people's livelihood, we're talking about lots of years of schooling and other experiences prior, we understand that there is an incentive to cheat. and we want to consider where that risk comes from, how we can mitigate it as best we can. Next slide, please. For my purposes, I'm defining remote proctoring as any time that someone is taking a test and not in a controlled environment, and they're being observed in some way. So with that, there are different ways that remote proctoring can exist, and we're going to talk about those. But that's what I mean when I keep saying remote proctoring over and over again. Next slide, please. The first form of remote proctoring is just human direct remote proctoring. This would happen most often in a university where a teacher is observing their class. They've got 30 students. All the students have their cameras on, and the professor or some other person is watching the students for what they would consider to be suspicious activity. This doesn't scale to national exams. This doesn't scale to licensure exams, clearly, because the number of people you'd have to be observing is many, and your attention is separate. So that really isn't a great option for what we're talking about, but it is something that exists in the space. The next is something that also isn't a great option for us, and this is, I'm sorry, next slide, is AI proctoring. And not everything here is actually using AI. I chose that name and then talked with the editors about it for a while. But really, it's a computer that's trying to identify suspicious activity. So it's going to be looking at any manner of variables that it can to try to say this person is doing something we don't like. That has some major issues with it, one of which is that AI is better at recognizing white faces than not white faces. There's a long list of things, but no one who is serious that I'm aware of would rely entirely on AI remote proctoring. It is there. It exists, but for a licensure exam also is not sufficient. Next slide, please. What we're most likely going to interact with is a combination between these two. And this can be done well or done poorly, but it is a space in which AI is directing the attention of a human in real time while monitoring many people. So the human, in some ways, acts as a catch against bad identification. But if the AI algorithm still is systematically identifying one group more than others, it's still potentially problematic. And that is kind of the best of bad options we have within a remote proctoring space. There are different types of AI algorithms. Clearly, some are going to do this better than others. There are different ways that a remote proctor is going to interact with candidates. Some will do this better than others. But this is, just a spoiler, the way that we should be doing remote proctoring if you're going to. You need an AI to be able to direct a person's attention, or there's just too many people to observe. You want to make sure that AI is fair, and then you want to train your remote proctor well. Next slide, please. All right. So that's the space. Now we're going to talk about risks. I'm using two words that I'm trying to just separate in our minds. So one is this validity idea, and the other was integrity. Validity, I'm talking about a person, and that means that this person I am giving the test to, and I say they passed, they should have passed. They have the competence to pass, and the person who fails should have failed. That's what I mean by validity. It is one person. Ways that could be threatened is if you had somebody else taking a test for you. That, you know, then you have a proxy. Clearly, you shouldn't have passed. The person who took the test for you should have passed. If you have a video who's monitoring a screen and someone is, you know, tagging into the answers, that's another threat to validity. But this is talking about a person. Okay. The second threat, which is the one that I am concerned with, the one that I want to focus on with you, is a threat to integrity. That means the test as a whole has been threatened. And that comes when items are harvested. When someone can come into your test, take the items out, know about what the items are ahead of time, and then go pass your test. So that's a cost. That's many people. Your test itself has been hurt. It's not that it was wrong about a given person because somehow they got around it. It's because the information is out there. And then the third section here, which is a risk, it's kind of separate, is, well, what happens when you're wrong? I said a person was cheating and they weren't. That's clearly bad. I said a person wasn't cheating and they were. Also clearly bad. And we want to balance and to consider what these risks are and how do we mitigate that risk as well. So to recap, first is validity. That says it's a risk that you said a person passed who shouldn't have, or you said a person didn't pass and they should. The second is that you have a case in which your exam has gotten out, people know what the questions are ahead of time, and your exam as a whole is no longer functional. It has lost integrity. And the third risk to be considering is how likely is it that you are going to say someone cheated when they didn't, or inversely miss someone who is cheating and they are. Next slide, please. So with that, remote proctoring is a major threat to integrity. It is a major threat to integrity because anyone with basic technical sense can harvest items from the test. You're distributing it on a screen in someone's home. They can hide the camera. They can put I'm not going to go into all the ways you can steal it. There are lots of ways that you can steal items on a test. We will respect your imaginations. Depending on how it's implemented, there's a variable threat to validity. There is probably a very good way to be pretty confident, about as confident as we are in in-person settings, that the person taking the test is the person who we think it is, and that when they pass the test, right? So that makes sense. Also, you could set it up in a way in which that wasn't true. We're just going to presume that you pick the one in which we don't think people are cheating. Then the last two is this false positive, false negative space. So a false positive would be saying someone was cheating and they weren't. We can imagine how bad that becomes. High stakes test, you are bringing things to bear potentially against someone and they weren't cheating. That's bad. And if you have a case in which what a person is doing is muttering to themselves a little and looking down, that's going to trigger, potentially, an AI, okay? The human comes over and asks what you were looking at. They say, I'm not looking at anything. And then they say, well, you need to move your camera and show me what you see, and there's a piece of paper on the ground. Okay, well, that person's cheating. Maybe they weren't cheating. Maybe there's just paper that was sitting there. Who knows? But when we have this situation, you can say someone's cheating and they weren't. We, I think, can all agree that's problematic. It's a risk we want to consider. The other side is much more likely, and that is that you don't catch the person who is cheating. We haven't found a good way to say that it's easier to cheat remotely than in person, but we know that people can cheat in both places. So going back to, wasn't my first slide, but if there's a high incentive to cheat, people will cheat. The point of this is that you can break the system in both cases. So we shouldn't be as worried about catching the cheater, in my opinion, as we should ways to handle it when we say someone's cheating and they aren't, because that's honestly more likely. The person who's good at cheating is going to be able to cheat and you won't catch them. All right, next slide, please. So I'm going to go back now and kind of talk about some of these types of proctoring that I spoke about before and just kind of explain why they're stronger or weaker in certain things. So the human remote proctor has divided attention. They're looking at lots of people at the same time, but as a bonus, they can have a real-time response. They can see something they don't like and ask the person to show them, for example, the camera and move around the room. It's impractical at the size and scale we're talking about. National Exam isn't ever going to use this. And when I say that it has low sensitivity, it means that you're not very likely to catch a person who is cheating. Next slide, please. And proctor fails in both. They're bad at catching the person who is cheating, and they're bad because sometimes they say the person is cheating when they're not. My point here is we would not use this, and we strongly, strongly advise against any type of exam that is in any way serious that relies entirely on AI proctor with the technology we have right now. It absolutely has the highest threat to integrity, and the reason for that is someone can take out the camera, take a picture of the question. The AI knows that they did it, but they still have it. The horse is out of the barn, and now you're closing the gate, and you're done. Like, it's just asynchronous. It doesn't work. All right, last, and as I hinted at prior, the best and really only option for real licensure exams would be a combination between these two, because it can focus the attention of the proctor on a particular event, so they can be monitoring multiple people at once. And it has, of the options, the best sensitivity and specificity. Next slide, please. All right, now the part that matters for you guys, which is ways that we can mitigate this risk. Oh, or not. Thank you, sorry. First off, you want a large item bank. You want a large item bank because if there are many, many, many items, and as I said before, the major threat here is to integrity, that your items have been leaked. Well, sitting and memorizing 5,000 items, you're probably putting more effort in than just studying for the test. So if you have a very, very large bank, the threat of those items being stolen gets smaller, assuming that it's not the same exact form. The next is a limited window of examination. That was discussed earlier. I'm not saying I'm a proponent of this, clear. I'm just trying to say these are ways to mitigate this risk. If an exam is out and live for a very short period of time, yes, people could harvest those items, but then if those items aren't seen again, the risk was minimized. Because, yes, you found out what the test was, it was just a day late. Loft and CAT are, Loft is linear on-the-fly testing. And what that does is it creates a test for every individual that's different than the test another person took. They all have the same, there's a large bank, it selects from that bank based off of a plan and gives every person, you know, the same number of questions, but they're different questions for each one. The bonus to that is you're very unlikely to see the same items that someone else saw. CAT is computer adaptive testing, and this is different from Loft in the sense that it is giving you questions based on how good it thinks you are at the thing we're trying to measure. So it's really trying to precisely identify your skill. So if you're getting things that are easy questions wrong, it's going to give you an easier question. If you get a hard question right, it's going to give you a harder question, and it keeps on doing this until it narrows it and says your skill level is here. Okay. You pass, you fail, depending on where that skill level was. The bonus to that is the person who's coming in to try to take the questions, to harvest your items, is not likely going to be getting them all right. They're there to try to just get the questions. So they will quickly move into the easier questions, which are questions that, if you're seeing them, you're very likely to not pass anyway. So the items that are going out are not the items that necessarily you're the most worried about going out. Now, that's not always the case. It's just a reason why we would assume a CAT scenario would possibly mitigate this risk. All right. Now, the next section, and this is, I'm moving away. The first three I just spoke about were integrity. That's talking about ways to mitigate the risk of your items are getting out. Okay. Now I'm talking about that last section, which is, well, what happens when you deal with someone who you think is cheating? Because that clearly is also something we should be concerned with when remote testing. And in order to do this well, you need a combination of three things. First, you need functioning data forensics, which is to say that you can identify with relatively good reliability people who are not behaving normally, people who are cheating, or people who are just displaying abnormal characteristics, because we don't need to get to cheating yet. We just say this isn't normal. If you know what normal looks like, you can say this is abnormal. You then need a policy for how you deal with that irregularity. And that policy needs to be clearly indicated to the candidates. And what all three of these together get you to is a position in which you don't ever say a person is cheating, because you don't have to. What you say is this remote test that you took, there were irregularities in the test, and we would like to do whatever your next thing is. Maybe it's an in-person test, maybe they retake the test. However you as a board decide to interact with it, but it gives you the option. Whereas if you just are in a data forensics position, you have a very limited set of options, because we say, this is strange, it doesn't look normal, but we're not confident enough to say you're cheating. What do you do with that? And you guys, I imagine, are not going to be willing to do so, because we don't want to call a person a cheater when there's a non-insignificant chance that they're not. And we know that all of these are very likely to tag a irregular behavior where the person just isn't acting the way most people act, but it's not cheating. Regardless, those three together, if you're going to try to act against a person when they're identified, which is within your scope, you want all three. You want to have very good data forensics, which is to say you're good at identifying irregularities. You want to have a clear policy for whatever you do with those irregularities, and you need to make sure the candidates know that ahead of time. Those are things we can do to try to mitigate the risk of false positives, false negatives. Again, telling people they're cheating. All right. Next slide, please. Doing on time. I'm doing okay. Conclusions, recommendations. If remote proctoring is going to be used for licensure exam, which it is, make sure that they're using a combination of AI and remote human proctoring. Look into what that AI is. Look into what they've done to say and make sure that it itself is valid and that it doesn't have inherent bias in it. Understand that your integrity is already compromised. The items are already out. If you're in a national space, someone has stolen those items. So what are they doing to mitigate the risk of that? Which is, we look into, if it's a national exam, what are the actions you're taking? Is it CAT? Probably not. Is it loft? Does it have a large item bank? How are they monitoring? You want to see that they are proactively handling that risk rather than saying it's not there. And last one, so this combination I talked about a second ago, but if you were going to deal in remote national, and you want to have any disciplinary option at all, you need to understand that no one is going to be confident that it actually was cheating. And therefore, how do you come up with your method, your approach that balances that? And I don't have an answer for what your policy should be. I do have that we want to be very clear on what the messaging and policy is, and that you need background data forensics. All right, next slide, and questions.
Steve, go ahead. Can I preface before we begin discussion?
Sure.
Just to make it clear, there's first of all, a lot of stuff we have to do on our exams coming up, not just the remote proctoring, but that's something that I haven't really put forward the remote proctoring for our exams alone. So what this, like I just kind of reiterated, was about the NBCC exam going to remote proctoring, and what staff will be doing is definitely looking at seeing if there are issues with the California candidates or any issues that arise. And then if there are, definitely we would bring that back to the board to look at to see where we would want to go with that. I do have also on the line Bob Blackwood from Pearson VUE. He would be able to give you a little bit of idea of the security or what they use. I believe it's a combination of AI plus actual people working with that. Is it okay if I patch in Bob?
Sure, yes. So we have a bigger picture, yeah?
Yeah.
Is it
David,
online?
is Bob online?
No. So moderator, we call the moderator for that? Do they know?
Yeah, moderator. Moderator?
I apologize, I did not hear the question.
Bob Blackwood?
Coming right up.
Thank you.
All right, we've promoted Bob Blackwood. You should have the ability to unmute at will.
Thank you, everyone. Bob is on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for allowing me to join today. And yes, I'm here to answer any questions anybody would have regarding Pearson VUE's online proctoring that is being utilized by NBCC.
Okay. So then we move on with the conversation. If there are any questions, then Bob will be able, along with our present guest, to be able to answer. So I would like to open the conversation, and I see Kelly speaking. And
Doctors, thank you so much for coming today. My understanding is that a year ago, the State Bar attempted to do a remote proctoring with their bar candidates statewide. My question was, and I understood that was not very successful, was that a remote plus AI attempt, or what went wrong in that situation, if you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. No, what, Abigail, and then I would like to go next.
I didn't get like any statistics and like, is it, how ineffective is this? Or any numbers?
Yeah, so there are different ways to look at that problem. A, we generally speaking don't know that someone's cheating, that we don't know that they're cheating, right? So we don't know how prevalent the cheating is. We do know that if you take a person and you ask them to cheat, they largely succeed and the AI doesn't detect it. That is true of in-person testing as it's true remotely. So when we ask about whether or not there's stats on it, the things we can measure are things like how often is someone tagged by, detected and interacted with, how often can we catch someone red-handed. Well, we can know that. We know the cases in which, like, yes, something came up and it seems verified. Like, for example, they have notes on a whiteboard behind the screen and you see that. Most of the time that isn't going to be true because you're scanning the room anyway with a camera ahead of time. So my point there is that we know when we catch them, we don't know the ones we don't catch. And because of that, it's hard to make an estimate of how much cheating actually is happening. And I don't know if that fully answered your question. So when we plant the person, we are confident they succeed. We just don't know how wide that is.
Okay. So there are no like actual studies. This is more like in theory?
There are definitely studies, and our other panelists can speak to some of those as well. The people who develop this obviously are doing their best to try to make it as accurate as they can. So they're going to show you what they've found. Again, if we can make questions like, generally speaking, we've detected this many anomalies, and that's different with this algorithm than that algorithm, but we don't know, was that person actually cheating? I would be happy to get back to the board if you want a review of literature. I assume that's within our scope, Heidi. But in my looking into this, the research that I reviewed was not compelling to me. And that's not to say that they didn't use numbers, but that the clear problem was, well, how many people are cheating that you didn't catch?
Okay, thank you.
The one thing I might be able to bring back with Bob on the line, I don't know if you can respond to that, but MBCC has been using online remote proctoring, the OnView system, for a lower level licensure exam. I don't know what the experiences are, if you could speak to that.
Yeah, they've been using online proctoring for that lower level exam, as you mentioned. Mainly out of the business continuity decision that for many of our clients had to make when the pandemic.
Bob, can you speak up? Sorry, but it doesn't come through.
Let me adjust my volume and see if that works.
This is the moderator. Moving closer to the microphone might also help.
How's that?
That's better.
Let's try.
Is that better?
No.
And now it's even worse.
It's worse. Well, that's not good.
Yeah, no, it's worse.
So I have a question.
Hold on just a moment.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me any better?
Yes.
No, we can't hear.
Any better?
Yes, now you go in and out, Bob, so.
Are you there? Maybe you can ask your question.
Okay, maybe.
Is that any better?
Yeah, that's better. Are you? Yeah, I don't know if you're speaking, but we're not able to hear you now. That was. Okay.
Okay, I will move on, to be honest, so that we can. Yeah. So I appreciate the presentation. Thank you so much. That was very, very informative. I think also in the context what Steve, you were saying at the beginning, we got to this conversation because obviously we're coming out on a pandemic. We have seen the challenges that our people have experienced in a time that was, difficult for everyone, and why remote testing could have been a solution or could be a solution into the future. Technology always changes and makes things better. So I think as a board, to me, that's just an invite, because our goal is to reduce disparity and making sure that accessibility increases. I do see all the risks, and I just want to make sure that also in our conversation, even though today it's not an action item, so we're not voting in one way or another, but also to take in consideration the possible pros, right? What has happened in the past 3 years during a pandemic, a lot of people couldn't go through testing because of safety or because our remote community don't have accessibility to sites that will allow them to take the test when they need to. So even though this is not your responsibility today to address that, so I appreciate the information. I think for the general conversation, it's just about balancing out what we're missing out today of people that are not able to properly take a test within the time they would like to because of how the site is far away or because of their physical inability to do so, and what proctoring tests examinations, remote proctor examination could bring to the table for folks that actually don't have access. So to me, it's more, definitely it's not a black and white answer. It's more like understanding how we can improve the different ways how people could have access, right, to testing. If also in the conversation where texting is even, part of the conversation. So I think looking at those besides the risk, but also what we're missing, it would be a great way to approach the conversation. And that's it on my side. Any observations, questions from our board folks? No? Then I will ask for, yes.
I have a quick amendment.
Please.
I did want to say to your question, it took me a moment, Abigail, that pass rates, there's a lot of stuff that was going on during COVID, so it's very hard to nail down whether or not the remote was there, and there were studies on both sides. So in some cases, it was shown that the pass rates increased in remote, whereas in other cases it didn't. So it was an inconclusive data point, but there was also a lot of stuff going on. So that's a hard time to really nail down that it was remote. And even if it is remote, that it's cheating is the reason that they're passing. So it's a very attenuated logic, but I did want to add that.
Or it could be actually because of better accessibility, if people are able to take the exam in a better conditions and now they
There's
pass.
just so many things, and you're super
So
stressed
we could
out
speculate both directions. It's not just cheating. Okay, I will see if there are, yes, please.
I will.
Please state your name.
This is Heidi Linzer, Chief of OPES. Will, to piggyback off that point, that oftentimes organizations that are using the remote proctoring will provide, look at the pass rates for candidates taking the test remotely versus candidates taking it at the test center, and indicate that there's no difference to try to bolster the argument that people are not achieving in the remote test center environment. So they should be collecting that kind of data.
Right, good to know. Thank you. Any comments from the board? Not at this point. From the members that are present, thank you. Come forward.
Thank you. Ben Caldwell, MFT. I wanted to call attention to the case of Aaron Ogletree, a chemistry student at Cleveland State University.
Can you speak up, Ben, for some reason? Oh, it's not on. Okay, if you can hold for a second so that it goes to the record. Any help with the mic? Oh.
Mr. Here, Mike.
We always had issues with standing.
You want me to answer this?
We should provide a megaphone in case. Go ahead, let's try it. Oh. You have none. That would not work, I'm sure. Do I use mine? I know. Can we Ben, can we have you move forward here? We're not afraid of you, so you can come. We have 4 mics over there, so I think that should. You have to turn around.
I've been using technology for years, and you have to turn on the microphone. Ben Caldwell, MSc. I wanted to call your attention to the case of Aaron Ogletree, a chemistry student at Cleveland State University. He was taking a remote proctored exam, and as part of the security procedures common to remote proctoring, his room was scanned prior to the test. He sued, arguing that his Fourth Amendment rights had been violated. The university argued, as you might, that the scan was part of a regulatory process meant to ensure exam security and not part of any criminal investigation or proceeding. Ogletree won. A federal judge ruled in August that the scan was a violation of his Fourth Amendment rights. It seems quite possible that exams utilized by the board as part of a licensure process could face a similar legal challenge. I'm not necessarily pro or anti-remote proctoring, but has the board or OPES consulted with legal counsel about this possibility? And are there plans to address the legal defensibility of steps used to ensure exam integrity? Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I don't know if, would you like to address that?
Yeah, I can answer briefly. First, the case that was brought up is very, as our lawyer present, hangs on the details. And the details of the case, the student was informed an hour prior that there was going to be a remote test and that he needed to have his room scanned. There was complete inconsistency across the university as to their policies relating to remote proctoring, and the type of remote proctoring we're talking about is that first kind, human proctoring, the professor's watching the room. The findings, which we can send on to you, hinged on the details and the idea that this was a violation, not necessarily by de facto because it was remote proctoring and being viewed, but because he didn't have notice, because the policy wasn't enforced across the school, that it was up to each teacher to decide. There was a litany of reasons. Next, that is just within that state. It doesn't yet apply outside. I've listened to many lawyers talk about this particular case who are interested in remote proctoring, and at this point, they are not concerned that this one extends out. In the event that it did, we would have a very different argument, and there should be discussion around that, but this one is a very niche space. Also, the idea of being required to do something rather than volunteering within the policy is a piece. If I'm choosing to take a remote test, and I'm saying, in order to take this remote test, these are the things I'm willing to do, it's very different than in this particular case in which I'm already in a class. Now you're telling me I'm remote taking the test, and you're telling me I'm doing it an hour before, and you're telling me how I'm doing it. It's just a different apples and oranges scenario. To the question of, are we concerned about defense of that case, no, but if something else came up, obviously we don't know.
This is Bob Black from Pearson VUE. Can you guys hear me now?
For the moment.
Yes,
Somebody
Bob.
say yes. Yes, we can hear you.
You're absolutely right in that, in Ogletree versus University of Cincinnati. And it is in the details, and our legal has gone through and had come to the very same conclusions that you just laid out. And it really has boiled down to consent. At least that's been our interpretation. So Pearson VUE asks for consent consistent with data collection and data retention, consent and opt-out, I should add, consistent with data retention and collection laws globally, and believe that is the area in which was missed, and potentially why it won't have further impact outside of that state. I should disclose I'm not an attorney, but that's what we've determined, at least through our legal team.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from people, from audience in present here? Otherwise, we are opening to the public. Moderator?
We are now
Could you
accepting
please
public
open to the
comments on the
public?
matter.
Thank you.
My apologies. We are now accepting public comment via WebEx. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take about 15 seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. We have a request for public comment from Kimberly Miller. Bear with us just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hi. Again, I'm Kimberly Miller, and I kind of advocated for proctor testing back during the pandemic. I homeschooled my kids, and the Connections Academy, which is Pearson now, has been using NBCC, I believe. And I have not found that people that I know that are also in the school are finding any problems with the proctor testing at home. You know, I don't know whether they have the parents being present, but most of the time parents are present. But I feel like for some people, depending on, I think there needs to be some exploration of certain needs for it, especially if there's anybody that's not able to do the special accommodations at the Pearson View Centers and such, because sometimes the accommodations are still not adequate. And I myself can say that because I had neck surgery and lower back surgery from a fall, and I've taken my ASWB test now 5 times, and I've been in utter agony, and it's very hard to concentrate with that. That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And those are all of our requests.
Any other
or that
comments?
was our only request.
Any other comments?
That was our only request for public comment,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Your voice too didn't come through. So we're back here. If there are any other questions, observations, perhaps our presenters would like to address, otherwise we can close this agenda item. Okay, I don't see any. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. Okay, we are now moving on to agenda item number 18, which is the presentation by Ross Lillian regarding the Department of Healthcare Access and Information. As for the other agenda item, there is not an action item, it's just a presentation. And I would like for Ross Lillian to, I don't know if they're connected.
Yeah, Ross, are you there?
This is the moderator. We're checking. Ross Lillian, you've been promoted. You have the ability to unmute at will.
Good morning, everyone. Can you guys see and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks for your time. I'm Ross Lillian. I'm the Health Workforce Development Research and Evaluation Chief at the Department of Healthcare Access and Information, or HCI. In my presentation today, will center around health workforce data collection in the introduction of our Health Workforce Research Data Center. Let's go to the next slide, please. The topics I'll present on is, of course, introduction to the Health Workforce Research Data Center, some of our data sources. I'm also going to share some use cases and how we can utilize some of this workforce data. And then finally, I'm looking forward to a Q&A with you. And we've teed up a slide at the end of the presentation. And go to the next slide, please. So to begin, I wanted to provide some background on this research data center. The center was created as part of a recast my organization went through. We used to be the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, or OSHPD. And now we're the Department of Healthcare Access and Information, or HCI. So as we graduated from that office to a department, strengthening our data assets was really important to us. In the health workforce space, this was critical because our state schools lacked that centralized source for health workforce data. Without this centralized source, health workforce analysis is cumbersome, it's challenging, It limits the type of analysis we can actually conduct. And that's because health workforce data assets are housed all over the place, many different sources. We have to understand where those data are located, collect those data, that's challenging, and then prepare data sets from different sources, collect it differently for meaningful analysis, understand limitations, assumptions, that's even more challenging. So the Research Data Center was created to solve this problem. The center is going to be the centralized source for health workforce data. This includes data on the supply of the workforce, the demand of the workforce, and the state's educational capacity to produce the future health workforce. The scope of the Research Data Center is large. It includes all health workforce disciplines. So we're currently working hard on identifying appropriate data suppliers and stakeholders and kind of strategizing on how best to report out on these data. As part of the statute, the center is tasked with developing an annual report to the legislature, which describes some of our priorities. So we're going to report out on education and employment trends. Understanding the educational pipeline and capacity to produce the future health workforce is critical. Also, there's a projection component to our analysis. So we are informed about current workforce issues, but also would like to understand what the workforce is projected to be in future years, which may provide key policy insights. Understanding supply and demand of the workforce is essential. This includes kind of the sheer volume of the workforce, but also the diversity of our health workforce. Our priority for HCI is promoting a culturally concordant and responsive workforce for California, and to develop policy with this goal in mind, we need to be informed about the racial and ethnic makeup of the workforce, their linguistic capacity, along with other key demographic data. And then finally, we're collecting these data and conducting this important analysis to inform our stakeholders and partners, you all, but also to inform state health workforce policy. So at HCI, we're going to be in this kind of unique situation, I guess, where we have access to this robust database, which will be an important input into our internal program policy design, as well as larger state policy issues as well, with the goal of targeting the resources with as much accuracy as possible. You can go to the next slide, please. So I want to take some time to discuss a couple of different data sources, a couple of different sources of data, for the Research Data Center. In particular, I think it's important to note that the center has authority through statute to collect administrative data. Administrative data are those data collected through the administrative process of a program. On the next slide, I'll describe a couple of examples of administrative data. But the authority to collect these types of data is part of the value add from the center. So working with partners on data collection tools during an application process, for example, this can lead to improvements in data quality and response rates. I think our health workforce licensure data collection, which I'm going to describe here in a few moments, that's a good example of administrative data. And so that type of data collection is different than an ad hoc survey, for example. I think surveys are really important as well and could add value to our center, especially when we lack that administrative data. So we're going to leverage surveys to the workforce, employers, stakeholders as necessary. There's also valuable public data sources that we're going to leverage as well. Next slide, please. So the Research Data Center statute prescribes us to work directly with the Employment Development Department, or EDD, state licensing boards, and state higher education entities to collect this workforce-related data. And the types of data we're prescribed to collect include supply and demand, geographical distribution, the diversity of our workforce, and the educational capacity to produce the workforce. And our authority to collect this high-quality administrative data puts us in that unique situation because we're able to manage and kind of these data and structure these data to link, to interact with each other along with other data sources. So I think ensuring that we collect high-quality data is fundamental to the work that we do, and this statutory authority really enables us to collect these high-quality data. Go to the next slide, please. So the critical supply set administrative data set for us for the center is our state licensing board data, which I want to discuss today. So HCI partnered with the Department of Consumer Affairs, or DCA, on this effort. And DCA, as you all know, oversees 19 healing arts boards, the Board of Behavioral Sciences being one of them, who manage the licensing process for many types of health practitioners in California. And as part of this licensure renewal application process, which typically takes place every 2 years, HCI has worked with DCA to implement a workforce data collection tool. And this presents a great opportunity for us to collect a robust set of data because health practitioners have to renew their license every 2 years. So they're gonna have that ongoing opportunity to submit these important data to HCI. Business and Professions Code 502 prescribes the data elements we may ask for during this process. Much of the data we're collecting is based on the Health Resources Services Administration, or HRSA's minimum data set. So HRSA recommends a baseline set of data to collect from providers. And this serves as an important starting point for us to be able to make comparisons of the workforce, not only throughout the state, but on the national level as well. And some of the variables we asked for will be listed on the slide here. This is not an exhaustive list, But just based on this limited list here, you could see how valuable it will be to collect these data from a wide range of healthcare providers throughout the state. So this data collection tool actually went live in July of this year. The data are all voluntary. So each provider in California, each licensed provider will have to see every question during the relicensure process. However, there's going to be a decline the state type of option as well. And to collect the highest quality data that we can and aim for that high response rate, we made it a priority to design the data collection tool in a manner which fosters that high response rate. So in partnership with DCA, we were thoughtful in the order of the questions, response options, thinking through what data is appropriate to roll over in succeeding years, just to make it easier for licensees. And we are also partnering with DCA and continue to partner with DCA in a marketing and a communications effort. Just want to say that DCA has been a phenomenal partner on this effort. And the purpose of this communication effort is to inform both the licensees and boards about why we're collecting these data. And I think this is a very important piece of this process because we want you guys to understand why we're asking for these data and what's in it for you all. How can we help the boards and our licensees? Go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to transition us a bit now with several use cases I just want to share with you. I'm going to touch on them. And these use cases are based on some of our historic data. The next few slides are examples of how we can utilize our data, but also serve as a starting point as we think about how can we take our analysis to that next level, which I'm hoping to discuss with you after this presentation. Excuse me. So this slide displays some of the professions we track and measure on ethnicity. This is not an exhaustive list of all the professions we collect data on. It's just kind of a simple visual, and has a bar there for state population, which adds some context. I think a takeaway here might be that as the educational pathway for profession increases both in length and in cost, we see less Hispanic representation as you move down that chart there. Go to the next slide, please. I'd also like to share some use cases that are probably more pertinent to the Board of Behavioral Sciences. So to start, we developed a chart that displays active licenses as of April 1st of this year. To the best of my knowledge, this includes at least a large portion of professions that BBS is responsible for licensing. This includes both associate and license level providers. The smaller gray portions of the bar represent folks that are licensed but are out of state, right? And this because someone has an active license doesn't necessarily mean that they're providing services in California. Nonetheless, I think these types of data are helpful to understand supply, but also the magnitude of each profession. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is a map that displays the regional supply of BBS professionals. One of the features of this map, which I think is really helpful for context, is the bar on the map that represents the California population. That's the white bar there. I think it's helpful because it adds context on the distribution of supply, right? So we're not looking at this map to make a claim about a shortage of professionals within a specific region, but we can get an idea of maldistribution of providers possibly, right? Or an idea of provider to population ratio. I want to explain this map to you. The bars that represent the 4 professions lined up evenly with that California population bar. That means the proportion of the respective workforce is equal to the percentage of the state population. So for example, if the Inland Empire represented 10% of the state population, the bar that represents MFTs in the Inland Empire would have to equal 10% of the MFT workforce to be equal. Hope that makes sense. So for example, in the Bay Area, all 4 groups of professions seem to be well represented relative to our population. Although the case is quite a bit different in the San Joaquin Valley, where relative to the population, all 4 professions seem to be underrepresented, which may speak to a maldistribution issue in our workforce. We can also conduct this type of analysis in a more granular geography. So county, for example, which may be even more helpful to understand regional workforce supply. The next slide, please. This slide is essentially a different display of the data on the previous slide. Instead of a map, it's an index represented as a histogram. I wanted to share this visual with you as a use case to show that we can leverage these workforce data in different ways, right? Depending on the audience, the context, we can display data differently. I think the message is largely the same as the map on the previous slide. That target line there is the broken horizontal line at 1, which represents the proportion of state population in each region. There's perfect representation based on based on population. All the vertical lines would be at 1. Obviously, that's not the case. We have some regions that are underrepresented based on population. I think the San Joaquin Valley, Inland Empire kind of jump out on this visual as that. But we also see other professions that kind of spike above that target line. The next slide, please. Thank you. So trending and projection data is something that will be coming out of the research data center, and it's important to us. This is an example of trending data. These are new licenses per year. I want to apologize for some confusion on this chart. The title states new and exiting licenses per year. This only represents new licenses. So per year, how many new licenses are issued by profession. Quick note on educational psychologists. That trend line looks to be really low, but this is based on the size of the profession and the scale of this chart. So I think generally when we trend data, we unlock insights or at least develop interesting research questions. There may be large spikes or dips in these data. Sometimes we want to understand why, or the trend line is telling a story. It can also be helpful for us to project into the future, right? So if we have high quality historic data, it makes our projections more accurate. And taking a look at this chart, something that kind of jumped out to me is that the number of new MFT licenses has been decreasing basically, I think since 2014 or so. There was a large dip in 2018 there. We see that same dip with clinical social workers in 2018 as well. So these types of observations can form those really interesting research questions and can provide key insights on the workforce. To the next slide, please. The age of the workforce is a really important data point for workforce planning. And these type of data may help us prepare with upcoming exits from the workforce. So on this slide, for example, it shows that nearly 35% of educational psychologists workforce is over 60 years of age. That may signal exits from the workforce soon. It may impact our workforce planning efforts. But to enhance these data and really the analysis we can actually conduct, it might be helpful to add other variables like geographic region, which kind of segues to my next slide if you want to. Thank you so much. For this visual, we combine median age by profession and by region. So with these data, we're able to drill down on a more granular level. And this going back to educational psychologists, the median age in the Northern and Sierra region is 58. You kind of look across the entire region actually for all four professions. The Northern and Sierra region is relatively older. The median age for MFTs is 55, for example. And we know from other data that MFTs and clinical counselors are also underrepresented relative to population in the Northern region. So potential exits from the workforce due to retirement, for example, may these compound these different workforce issues. I think in general, combining some of our different workforce data variables really enhances our analysis. The next slide, please. Thank you. We also created slides which display data on race ethnicity for the four professions. So these are data based on our previous licensure survey, and the data for race ethnicity are voluntary. So the response rates vary a bit. For social workers, it's about 55% with our old data. Just want to take a moment and point out that since we launched this research data center and implemented our new survey in July, the response rates have been outstanding. It's about 85% across the board with these demographic variables. We're really excited about it, and hopefully I'll be able to share the new data with you all in an upcoming board meeting. But to provide some context in this visual, there's that vertical line there for each race ethnicity category that represents state population. So for example, our Hispanic population is about 40% for the state, and you can see that there on the chart. To have 100% population representation, the bars that represent race ethnicity will have to equal that state population marker. We also added 2 bars for race ethnicity for the health workforce, in this case, social workers. One is all licensees, one is recent licensees, and those are folks that received a license since 2016. And we broke out recent licensees to determine if there are more recent trends within these data. I think generally our social work workforce is more diverse relative to other professions. You know, we have that gap with our Hispanic population, as you can see, although it's much more pronounced in just about every other workforce profession. There's also a gap with our Asian population there. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. For our marriage and family therapists, the concordance gap for Hispanic population is larger than social workers, although we seem to be making progress with our recent licensees who are generally more diverse. And I think an observation across all 4 professions is that there's always that gap with the Asian population. Next slide, please. These data represent our licensed professional clinical counselors, generally less diverse than social workers and MFTs. There are large gaps for Hispanic and Black populations. An observation I wanted to point out I thought was kind of interesting is that this is one of the few workforces where the recent licensees display less Hispanic representation than all licensees. So less than 10% of those recent licensees or folks since 2016 identified as Hispanic. And with the growth in our state's Hispanic population, seems to be turning in the wrong direction. I think that's noteworthy. Next slide, please. So we have one last slide on the race ethnicity, and this is for educational psychologists. I think it's kind of similar to the data we saw for MFTs. Recent licensees seem to be more diverse, good sign, although we still have those large gaps for our Hispanic and Asian populations. I think so demographic data, race, ethnicity, language of spoken, gender identity, etc., is critical for the policy work we do at HCI, and it's a priority for us. We strive for equity throughout the state. and using data to measure concordance, which is essentially measuring if state representation aligns with our state population. That's really important. That's really important analysis for us. And we're happy to share this analysis with the board or other types of analysis that would be helpful. Next slide, please. So one final use case I promised before the Q&A portion. And it's just to highlight the opportunity we have at HCI to integrate workforce data with other data sources we collect at HCI. So we collect a lot of interesting high quality data related to patients and healthcare facilities in California. Something we publish on our website is emergency department volume and capacity. So as we analyze emergency department volume, we added a workforce data layer, which is whether or not the hospital was in a health professional shortage area, which is an area that lacks a sufficient amount of primary care providers. Generally speaking, these emergency departments in the shortage areas did see greater volume than non-shortage areas. The larger point is integrating our workforce data really gives us the opportunity to take a more holistic look at the workforce and the impacts that it has. So we can go to the next slide. That was a lot of information. I'm looking forward to talking less, listening more, and so getting into a Q&A session. And I just happy to answer any questions you have. And I just thought of a couple of questions that may help prompt some of our conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Lillian. Definitely the board will benefit from having shared, because there's so much to unpack here, right, that there is a lot to look into it. So having that accessibility to that data would be really, really great. Do we have any questions at the moment for anything that's been shared with us today here from the members of the board? Yes, Abigail.
He may have mentioned this, but I didn't hear it. So this data for each license by race and ethnicity and the population, what year is all of this data from?
Oh, good question, actually. I missed that.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, to cut you off. It's from April of this year, April 2022. So that's why it's from the race ethnicity data in particular, from our previous survey. We did a previous survey where the response rate weren't as high. We improved that survey quite a bit, and that's a new survey that we launched in July. So it's only been about 4 months with our new survey, but the response rates are much higher. The race ethnicity data I shared with you, it's about 55-ish% across the 4 different professions. And really, as I mentioned, the response rates have been really high with our new survey. Looking forward to sharing those results with them in the future.
Because what I've read is that, like, for at least the Hispanic population is at more than 40%. So
more than 40 is there a specific workforce or profession?
So of the population.
Oh, the state population? Yeah, it's about 40%. And I think if you look at it like for the under 45 population, it's close to 45%. But yeah, that's accurate.
Oh, it's okay. So you're only measuring under 45 age group.
No, so on these slides, this was the entire state population. So for Hispanics, overall, it's about 40%. When you dig down, the younger population is about 45. So as time goes on, right, our Hispanic population is going to continue to grow. And that's why it's important to kind of trend these data out and look at recent licensees versus all licensees.
Oh, got it. Okay. Yeah, this is great to see the trend because, yeah, as the population grows, which I believe they predict it's going to be, 55 in a couple of years %, like we can see the gap, right, that exists. So thank you.
Thank you, Abigail. Any other questions or observations?
Yes,
Kelly?
Mr. Chair, I really enjoyed this presentation, and I think it's a wonderful presentation on comprehensive data. I would really love to see, if you have that information, breakdown of practitioners by population for rural versus non-rural communities, or rural versus suburban and metropolitan communities, and also practitioner breakdown for tribal lands and tribal communities.
Thank you, Kelly.
Absolutely.
Do we have that? Yeah.
Yeah, Brad, we absolutely could do that. Thank you for the feedback.
Thank you, and I really, really enjoyed this presentation.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else from the board? Wendy?
I wanted to kind of echo Kelly's comments about getting more data along those lines. I do think the statewide graph where they showed by region kind of starts, it's not where you're going, but starts to hint at some of those issues. If you look at the gaps in clinicians in those areas relative to their share of the state's population, I think you really start to see in these inland rural areas that there's a pretty significant gap in service for populations there. But I agree, I think the more detailed information that my colleague requested, I think would help unpack a lot more of that data.
Any other comments from the board or questions? Okay, any comments from the public that is present in regards to the presentation? No. Moderator, can we open to the public and see if there are any comments from the public or questions?
We are now accepting public comment on the matter. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And our first request comes from Kathy Atkins. Hold on just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, thank you. This is Kathy Atkins from CAMPT, and I wanted to thank HCAI for presenting today. I think someone said this earlier. There's a lot to unpack here, and I would agree. I'm looking at it and taking notes, and look forward to reviewing it further. And I also really enjoyed and appreciate the overview of the makeup culturally, racially of the demographics. That's something I know not just CAMPT is looking at, but other organizations, how to better serve the California consumer and have providers that the consumer can relate to and see themselves in. And so that's something we're focused on. And again, I know we're not the only organization. So I'm thrilled that we're taking a look at that and that the California is as well. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. And our next request comes from Carmen Spears. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. All right, Carmen, we've sent you a request to unmute, and it looks like you have.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, hi, Carmen Spears. I'm actually a new LCPC BIPOC therapist. So I did have a question, and I want to thank you for that lovely presentation. I might have missed just bits of it. So I guess I just have a main question. What and where are some of the current needs for therapists in California? I know there are a lot of therapists who have openings. I know you talked a little bit about, I guess, like different demographic areas, and I know someone just posed the question about the breakdown, rural, suburban. Is it more of a need for certain demographic, more BIPOC, LGBTQ, etc., more for therapists, more for hospitals? And I know you just mentioned about the shortage of therapists for hospitals, more for agencies, groups. Is it more there's not enough therapists for clients that want to use insurance-based, or even just like Medi-Cal? I guess I was just looking for any more information as far as like more, as far as the needs, as I keep hearing about this crisis in California for therapists.
Those are great questions, Carmen. Thank you so much. Sorry, is it okay to hop in?
Yes, I'm finished.
Okay. So those are great questions. I think I can answer some of them. So what the data is showing us is by region. There's some regions that need more therapists more than others. For example, the Bay Area is it looks like to be well represented. If you look at the Northern Sierra region, the San Joaquin Valley, Inland Empire, those are regions that are lacking therapists relative to other regions in the state. And also, I think BIPOC, absolutely, we always need more BIPOC providers. We want to have cultural concordance, right? So we want our providers to match the state population. But there are definitely those certain regions that are lacking providers more than other regions. In terms of practice settings and insurance, things of that nature, I could look into that and maybe get back to you. I don't have those data off the top of my head. I appreciate the questions, though.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Moderator, are there any other questions or comments?
Yes, we have at least one more. Kimberly Miller, bear with us just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hello?
Welcome. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'm kind of agreeing with the last comment from the woman that just spoke. And I am in agreement with the shortage on therapists within the clinical agencies and the hospitals. I mean, it's a crisis all the way around. And I speak because I've been a patient, kind of a patient advocate. So my daughter, who is multiracial, she's black and white, and I don't like to mention the hospital, but it's a big one in the Inland Empire, and it has terrible services as far as I can concern when it comes to dealing with people of different ethnicities. They tend to ignore you, and when I've asked for a social worker to help her through her health issue regarding the anxiety of that issue, they address only, the doctors will address the anxiety and not the real problem, like medical gaslighting. That's going a lot right now. And we've had to drive 2 hours away now to UCLA because we weren't getting the proper care or any kind of thing. And the social workers never would come and talk to us. And we'd even get made fun of by some of these professionals. And I don't understand why. I literally have to chase a social worker down to get one.
And that appears to be all of
Thank-
our requests for comments at the moment.
Okay, thank you, moderator. We're bringing back the conversation to the board, and I see Abigail Ortega has.
Okay, I would also love to see a breakdown of languages spoken, because recently I was reading about the indigenous population in California, that they speak over like 14 dialects, and how they are kind of like lumped into Spanish. So just wondering like how many providers can offer services specific to the indigenous population.
We could definitely provide those data.
Yeah.
We collect data on about 50 different languages spoken. I think indigenous, there's some different, like 4 or 5 different breakouts for those languages spoken. Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to. I'd love to bring our new data back to the board and present in the future. Languages spoken is really critical for us. Language concordance is really important.
Thank you, Steve.
And just to say, yeah, we'll be working, Ross, you'll hear from me quite a bit in the next few months and years. So we will be presenting and using this as like a starting point for some of the conversations we're going to have around workforce development and the, barriers to licensure and then the need to. So it definitely is going to be a very useful tool. And thank you, Ross, for presenting that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions or comments, we will let you go, and thank you again for your availability and the work behind it. So thank you so much. Okay, I would suggest 10 minutes break before we resume. And as a reminder, we're changing a little bit the agenda and the discussion. So the next item as we come back, we will not do item 19 and 20 right now, which is the presentation by board staff regarding the legislative process and our executive officer report, but we will resume the work with agenda item 21, which is the discussion and possible action regarding the associations of social work boards and release of 2022 release of exam data. So we are resuming 10 minutes. It's 12:05 at 12:15. Thank you.